Good day. This is Richard Lowe with Conversations with Influencers, and I'm here with Abbie Richie. She is the founder and CEO of Senior Savvy, the host of Tech Tuesday, TED speaker, and tech correspondent. I am Richard Lowe, the writing king. I'm a ghostwriter, a writing coach, and I also do LinkedIn branding for people. So let's get started. How are you today, Abbie?
Pretty good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's you've got a lot of things to say. I can tell because you sent me a big long description. So let's get started. Why don't you tell me about yourself?
Okay, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur on both sides. And what that means is that we are hardwired in our family to do things. So I started this company, Senior Savvy, about 5 years ago. It's the second company that I've started. And I started this in 2018. It's truly the marriage of two things I love, which is all things tech and helping older adults. I grew up with my Nana and Papa, and I have a deep love and admiration for older adults. And when I found myself unemployed and my other and in need of work in 2017, nothing was panning out, nothing. And it was pretty depressing because I had been working since I was 13. But nothing was panning out. And I remember talking to my dad at the time about how distressed I was and nobody wanted me. And he said, Abbie, there's a golden pony under all this poop. Those things that dads say, right? Well, not long after that, I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to serve. In the meantime, I've got some spare time, some time I've never had before. And I'm just going to start helping people who need help. And at that time, my in-laws had downsized and they needed help with their technology. And then their neighbor needed help. And then their neighbor needed help. And I thought to myself over the course of a month or so, I was like, you know what? I really like this. I really like it. And I can only do something that I'm passionate about and something I really enjoy. It serves a need. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to see if there's really a greater need for this. Now, I live in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona. We have a lot of retirees. I didn't start that company because of where I live. I started it simply because I just was passionate about it. And so I decided I was going to call senior living communities in my area. I had no connections there at all. In fact, I'd been driving by them for years and didn't even know they were there. That's how unaware I was. But I made 5 phone calls in one day and I asked if they wanted a free workshop. And the workshop topic was, and seriously, I made this up on the spot. I called it Cell Phone Secrets for Seniors. I hadn't written it. I had never taught it. In fact, I hadn't even done anything on PowerPoint in 10 plus years. But I thought, you know what? I'm a teacher. I've always taught. I can do it if I need to. And that's the entrepreneur in me, right? The ingrained entrepreneurial positioning. So I offered this free workshop. I got 3 bookings by the end of the day. By the end of the week, I had the other 2. And I just started going in to these senior living communities. Now, these are not nursing homes. These are luxury senior living communities where people with a lot of income, a lot of planning, a lot of desire to connect with family and friends, and they want to use their technology. That's the type of person who lives here. And they started teaching this class and then getting private sessions, one-on-one, started billing for the class. And then I just started to grow the services out. And come 2020, things changed dramatically. All of these senior living communities closed. I had no access to serving the people I loved. And one community here in Arizona, it's called Sagewood. They were really tech forward. In fact, they had been doing their community-wide meetings on Zoom for years because they didn't have a large enough meeting room to house everyone. So they started teaching all of their residents how to use Zoom years before COVID. In fact, they taught me how to use Zoom. And my students, they just kept asking me, can you teach on Zoom? Right? We can't come here, but can you teach on Zoom? Seriously, I hated Zoom. I wanted nothing to do with Zoom. It's so excessively complicated, right? And if you're thinking about maybe getting, a dozen or two people over the age of 80 onto a Zoom call, I mean, who would ever want to do that, right? But these residents knew how to use the technology. So I started teaching them on Zoom. I wasn't happy with it. It was weird and it was unusual, but I got used to it. And then I just started kind of piloting out the same model at other places. And seriously, was able to get so many people on Zoom blindfolded. Like, you're like, all right, click here. All right, that it really just became a victory after victory after victory. And Senior Savvy went from serving 5 communities here in Arizona to 5 states, to 25 states, to 35 states, and international. So we really just grew because there was such a need for this type of programming at different senior living communities.
Very interesting. Yeah, this sounds like a success story to me. Is this what you gave your TED talk about?
No, not at all. I didn't. And so the TED Talk, I really wanted to talk about the fact that the way we're teaching older adults how to use technology is dead wrong. Okay, they're not dinosaurs, they're scholars. And I really saw that people have been trying to teach older adults how to use technology as if they are 20-year-olds. You go into the Apple store, it's loud in there. There's like a lot of reverberation off the walls and people are talking and even if you do take a class, the instructors speak very quickly. And it's just hard to hear and hard to understand what's being said. So in the other part of that is that older adults, when I'm talking about older adults, I mean like people who are 80, 90, 100. They're very traditional learners. They took notes, they wrote dissertations, they typed things, right? And they like to learn in a more traditional form. So, and they want to learn from the basics. And there's there are many classes these days, online classes, there's YouTube, whatever, but they like come at it from a place where you might already be somewhat of an expert and that you may already have your basic knowledge, foundation, terminology. But my students want a basic foundation and a basic understanding of the technology they're using so that they can build on it and feel more confident and empowered to continue learning. And so we're skipping some of these steps when it comes to teaching older adults. So that was what I really wanted to talk about. But here's what happened. It's kind of funny. I had applied. And have you ever tried to apply for a TED Talk before, Richard?
No, I haven't. It's on my bucket list.
It's very rigorous, and we could definitely talk about that sometime. It's an incredibly rigorous process. It's like you're applying for a residency, and you have to apply uniquely at all these different places. But the fact is that it's 100% possible. They're doing TED Talks everywhere, every single day. Yeah, and the first thing I did was I consulted with a TED coach, and I gave him my idea. The way we're teaching older adults is dead wrong, and I had like this outline. I didn't have it written, and as you know, I pilot things first, right? See if it works, then I build on it. But the TED coach, his name is Cesar Cervantes. He listened to me. He said, "You know what? You got this. You got this. Like, this is an original idea we're sharing. No one else is talking about this. Just keep applying. You're going to get swooped up. Don't give up." And I really was committed every single Tuesday to complete 3 applications. Okay, like when I get an idea in my mind, there's just nothing that's going to stop me, right? And if you need more support, get into a Facebook group, get into Cesar's Facebook group, get some help to, because it can be rigorous and it could be a real determination. So midway into the year, I started in January of 2022. Midway into the year, someone from TED emailed me and said, we your application, but we want you to talk about something different. So I was like, okay, what do you want me to talk about? We want you to talk about AI. So this was last year, and I was like, all right, I'm really not an expert on AI, but I am an expert on older adults and technology. Can I talk about how AI will impact older adults and technology? And they said, yes. And I said, okay, you got a deal. So because I'm not an expert in AI, what I did was I researched every single TED Talk on AI, and I watched them all. There are like 24, but I'm sure there are a lot more today than there were a year ago. They did a lot of research, and then I kind of felt like an expert in AI at that point. And this is even before I ever started using like a chat GPT, right? This is before that really even came on into our daily vocabulary. Nonetheless, there's many ways in which AI is going to impact the longevity of our older population. Okay, and that's really what I focused on in how you, perhaps as a family member, can help an older adult adopt to the AI technology instead of running from it, lean into it. And that's what my TED was about. And I was ready to deliver that on stage. And then they were still involved in COVID because it was going to be in California. And so I just delivered it. I just recorded it and sent it in. So I actually got off easy, right? I didn't have to go stand on stage and use a clicker. I could just do it from the comfort of my office, which I was really pleased about. Now, I want you to know, I do have another TED baby in me to deliver. The original one, right? My motivation is not as strong as it was. However, I'm not opposed to it either. I would do it.
You should apply for it. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, thank you. I'll pick it back up. Since I started the company, I've also become known not so much as the AI expert, but an expert in technology for older adults. It's kind of a niche thing, right? And this really is in alignment with the influencer aspect. You see, I have a very specific messaging. My messaging is very specific. I'm not talking to everyone about technology, although there are plenty of times they get called in to talk about consumer tech on the news, for instance, and I'm more than happy to do that. I like a good charger as much as the next person. But typically the discussion that I'm asked to have is on how technology is impacting older adults, specifically those living in senior living communities. And I have a show on every Tuesday. It's called Tech Tuesday. It's on a live stream platform that gets broadcasted out to over 60,000 C-suite senior living executives every week. I have loved doing this show. It has made me so knowledgeable and so connected on many, many levels. And like just this week, my topic was toilet tech, also known as the smart bathroom. I like alliteration. I'm sure you know that by now. Senior savvy, cell phone secrets for seniors. I like the toilet tech, right? No one wants to talk about it, really, but it is a massive place for data collection. It's like the next frontier of blood test.
I've
Right
actually
there.
I've actually written articles on it.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah, the potential of a smart toilet and how it can take there's all kinds of. I mean, what do you do? What happens when you go to the doctor? They do urine tests and all that kind of stuff. Toilet could do that really easily. It's right there. And
Yeah.
I wrote several articles on that. It was quite fascinating. There's not a lot of it actually at this point.
I had a couple of people on. I had a panel on. I interviewed my panel. Two of them have, actual toilet technology. One is Toy Labs, and the other one is called Kasana Care, and where they're collecting data. And then the other panelist was from Dignity Lifts, so that it's actual lifting you from the toilet seat, so that you don't have to have a caregiver support you in that way.
Yeah, when my wife was sick, I had to basically help her off the toilet, and that was a lot of work. Long time ago. She's passed away since, but I had to go through the whole thing. But yeah, that's actually a very interesting niche is the older generation. Myself, I left tech 10 years ago, about 10 years ago. I was the director of technical services and computer operations at Trader Joe's.
Okay.
And then I decided, okay, I don't want to work for corporate. I'm going to be retiring in a few years. So let's start my own company. So I became a ghostwriter and never looked back, because tech and ghostwriting for me go together real well. So I had a similar story on AI. I had a client come to me and say he wants a book on AI. It's like, I barely seen it before, but there's Google, there's research tools, there are libraries, there's
Spotify.
experimenting. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of ways. This was way before ChatGPT. So all kinds of things on AI. So I wrote a book on AI, and it became a pretty good seller. Now my name's not on it, but that's okay. I got paid for it. And then I wrote a second, and then a third, and then a fourth. Did the same with the metaverse and cybersecurity. Now I am a cybersecurity expert, so because that's one of the things I did. So did 4 books on that, and 48 books later, I'm doing very well. Even though the first boss that I got after I left, I went to work for a ghostwriting company, told me I wasn't going to make it. And I just love being gaslit, because then it gives me a chance to prove them wrong. So I made it. And now I'm actually a premium ghostwriter, charge good rates, make good money, and expanding through the area and through the United, because it can ghostwrite from anywhere. So one of my favorite customers right now, he's a current customer, is a 90-year-old. And fascinating story, and all facility. I mean, he's totally healthy. His mind is healthy, and we're writing a book together, and it's going very well. And he is sharp. My Lord, he is sharp. He hand wrote these notes out. It's like 50 pages of notes, not hand wrote, but hand typed. And it took me a while. I'm still working on making the book out of that, because that's just notes. And he likes what I've written, and he wants to do a second one.
Awesome.
But never would have expected to have a 90-year-old, soon to be 91-year-old, as a ghostwriting client. But it's interesting. Most of my clients tend to be like from 40 on up, because I'm a premium ghostwriter, so it's a little more expensive, and they have to have the income to do that. So anyway, similar story, different area. Never given a TED Talk, though. That's one of my goals. But I'm going to start from Toastmasters. I think I've been to some local Toastmasters before the pandemic. I want to start going back now that they're coming back, because they went all Zoom, and that's not the way I want to learn to speak to people in person. It's hard to speak to people in person when you're on Zoom. And it seems like a good way to get over I tended to be extremely introverted and extremely shy. I broke that. We can get into that later if you want. And now I'm less introverted. I'm still introverted, but less not social. As I can have these kind of interviews. And that was a big, big, big change in my life, was being able to speak to people like you. So that's kind of my story. So so you've done a TED Talk, you run a company. I assume you've hired many, 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 many people for that now. It's not just you. It started off as just you, right?
That's right. It started off with just me. I hired an assistant about 3 years ago. That was a big thing. I knew I needed someone. I needed some help. And yeah, and like I tell people, because I do work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and like I tell people, when you bring on a new person, it doesn't have to be a 30 hours a week kind of thing or whatever. You can bring them on really small, start small and build from there, and make sure that you have the rapport, right? Make sure that you're on the same page. So, I just started small with my assistant, a couple hours a week, and started building from there. And that's actually the model that I've put in place. And anytime I'm bringing on someone new, let's start small. Let's make sure it's a good fit, and then continue to build your responsibilities out from there. So, I think it's a really fine combination of skills and compassion, looking for someone to help with technology when it comes to working with an older adult. can be frustrating sometimes. They will ask you to repeat things often. And a lot of it, which I've noticed when I have worked with people one-on-one, a lot of it has to do with shelving my own agenda so that I can be present for them. And what I've found is that older adults, I absolutely think they are the best people on the planet because they're present. And anyone under the age of 50 or even, is is not that present. There are a lot of things competing with your attention. But my clients are very present and they're incredibly wise and they have learned so much. And so, if they want to share their story, and in fact, quite often I will just say, what kind of work? What kind of work are you doing? What kind of work did you used to do? And I'd love to hear about them. And mostly with the people that I started working with at these communities, they are some of the most accomplished folks I have ever met. We have, judges, and I worked with one person who was an ambassador in a foreign country, another person who was the former CEO of Mayo, just like all these incredibly distinguished folks with so much wisdom. And I've worked a lot of my clients are women. They're grandmas. And the really neat thing about it is that, prior to COVID, I used to bring my kids with me everywhere. I've got kids. They're teenagers now, and I wouldn't bring them with me almost anywhere. But at that time, I could pick them up from school, and I would just take them to a client session and just say, you guys sit here, go sit in the library at the community and do your homework. And they're good kids, and they would do that. Occasionally I'd bring them into a client's home, and the clients just loved on them. Let me give you some cookies. It was like this full intergenerational blessing, right? And I have some clients, and my kids would just say, like, she's our second grandma. She's just so wonderful. And still are to this day. And I just really feel like there's something completely holistic about, serving an older adult in their home with whatever their need is, and then also having this intergenerational thing with the kids. And in fact, a lot of my tech support specialists are moms of school-age children. And I'm just like, you know what, this is an ideal role for a mom, because all of the tech support takes place during school hours, 9 to 2, and not on the weekends. And there's just no homework involved here as a tech support specialist, because it's really everything you already know up here. That's what we're teaching, along with some grace and some patience. Since I'm doing a quick Google search here or there. But for me, when I've seen my clients, I always feel like they're the universal mom. That's what, like you have a universal remote. It can be used on any TV, right? But there's like a universal mom where they're gonna give you wonderful advice. You can ask them anything, and they've just been lovely, wonderful people. And I couldn't be more blessed to have fallen into this. This wasn't what I didn't have any notion whatsoever to start a company that was going to help older adults. In fact, I had already had my own company for 15 years before I started this one. And I really was like, oh, gosh, who wants that again, kind of thing. But then honestly, I love having the flexibility of working from home. I've always worked from home since my children were born, and my oldest is 16. And it's just very flexible. I can go pick them up. We've got all those holidays and early releases and stuff like that. So it's just been an immense blessing. And people will say, like, you must have, the patience of a saint or something like that. And I would never think of myself as someone with saintly patience. I would just think of myself as someone in the right place. And so when you're in the right place, you have the right mindset and the right spirit about you to help people.
I understand. Actually, a lot of my best clients have been older people. They have a lot of stories to tell, and they want to write them down. They've made a business, and they're in. And a lot of people, I think, fall prey, including myself, fall prey to the idea that you can't. There's nothing to do in your older years because you're retiring. You're going to go on cruises and stuff, and I like meeting the older people who have rejected that, myself included. And hey, the second you've got your money in the bank, you've had your kids, now go out and make a business for yourself or whatever you're going to do.
Mhm.
Whatever your dream is. Mine was to become a writer, and pursue that, because I think that we look at the older years as a winding down of life, and actually, it's not. It's not. Most of the older people that I've met, um, there's always the older people who are winding down, but there are a lot of older people, especially my clients, that, like you've said, tend to be winding up actually, but they're in a different phase.
Yeah,
They know
absolutely.
they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
very interesting. That's the kind of client that's probably on my ideal client list,
Yeah.
is older people who have created a company, who aren't
Mhm.
distracted by the running of the day-to-day company anymore,
Mhm.
who have, of course, the means to do their book and who want to do it and have a story to tell. That's
Yeah.
what I'm looking for in my client base, a lot. And when I find them, it's a joy. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that for sure. So I was going to say, yeah, I would never look at someone in their older years and think that it was time for them to settle down. And actually, this was modeled for me by my parents. I told you I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur. They will probably never stop working because they love what they're doing,
Mhm.
right? I don't think my dad would ever stop working, ever. Like maybe the nature of his work is changing. Right now, my dad only works on days that start with T. Um, and he's just continued to work from home since COVID because that works best for him, right? My mom is a retired interior designer. She will never stop working. She loves creating beautiful spaces for people. And while she may not need to, it's her talent, right? And that's the kind of thing that keeps you passionate and excited for the next day, being able to use your God-given talent and skills. And I think that when you find something and you have knowledge to give back, this lends purpose to your day to day. And we all need a sense of purpose. And what could be better in later in life to be able to mentor, to write, to give back. There's this one gentleman I meet with regularly. He was like the VP of sales for Procter and Gamble and another GM, and he's also my business mentor. That's what he does now. He does mentoring for small businesses, and he just loves to be able to help people see beyond their limitations.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I got my first taste of working with an older person when I was 17, which was many years ago, longer than I like to admit. My grandfather was in World War II, and he we'd go to the family dinners. He would be the cook, and he was always kind of, "Don't get near grandfather. He's grumpy. He has a temper. Blah blah blah. He's weird. Blah blah blah." Well, one day I decided, I should know my grandfather, and to heck with everybody else. So kind of boldly went up to him and, "What's your story?" And the first thing he did was teach me how to cook, because he was a cook. Turns out he was a cook on the Yangtze River Patrol just before World War II. So he was on a little boat. There were 5 of them going up and down the Yangtze River, and then he was captured on Corregidor and took place in the Bataan Death March. Spent 4 years in a POW camp, and I wrote this book. We never published it, but I wrote a book about his life. And after interviewing him a few times and reading his journals and things, what I realized is, if I went through a Japanese hell camp for 4 years and watched people die around me, I'd be a little off too.
Yep, you would be. That's for sure.
And I'm totally fine with him now,
Yeah.
what I thought at the time. I mean, he was a cool guy. He
Mhm.
just he was hard to approach because obviously, I don't think they had the words then PTSD, probably, a lot, and all the other things that go along with that. And then coming home and having the shock of things have changed. Just all these things came out when I wrote his book. And it was amazing working with an older person. That was my first time working with somebody who was literally old. And then it was funny, my second time working with somebody old had nothing to do with ghostwriting. He was a World War II German Nazi U-boat commander. He was my boss at a liquor store. And he used to tell me all the stories, he was the enemy and stuff. And I learned a lot from him. Boy, he hated Jews. Oh my God. But I stayed with him for 2 years, and I asked him why. Everybody else got fired within a month. They come and they go, they come and they go. He says, because you're competent. And that's when I learned something as an 18-year-old was be competent and you can survive anything. And he was rough. He was tough. He believed in discipline, obviously. And, he was doing okay as an immigrant to the United States. And he pretty much dropped all of the Nazi stuff. He wasn't like a hardcore Nazi. I mean, he still had the underpinnings of it, but he didn't show any of it. But it was fascinating. These two older gentlemen, I think he was in his 70s when he hired me, maybe 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
And same kind of thing. I mean, I'll second and third and fourth, what you've said is the older generation has so much value that, and even as a young child, age 17, 18, I recognize that. And I would seek out those people for mentorship, for coaching, for just to talk to. So you're absolutely right.
There's a program, speaking about veterans, that my daughter has joined in high school called the Veterans Heritage Project. Have you heard of this before?
I have not.
So what they do, and I think it's been around about 18 years now, it's at different high schools. What the students do is they interview a veteran and they tell their story. And for a lot of these veterans, they've never told their story. You take your story and you keep it close to home, right? Have you found that too?
Very much so. Very much so.
So this is an opportunity for a high school student to interview a veteran, write their story, and then the story gets published in a book with like 30 other stories. And then that story gets sent to the Library of Congress so that the high schooler then becomes a published author. And I knew that's probably why my daughter was interested, and maybe she had a little peer pressure to do it, because we actually don't have any vets in our family that are living. And so the first year, they just matched her with someone, and she interviewed them. And we went to they had a book signing event and ceremony, and it was just so wonderfully patriotic and intergenerational, and really just brought you into a space where you could be proud for these high schoolers and you could be proud for these vets, right? It was great. And last year, she interviewed my sister-in-law's father, and which was just such a blessing. And my sister-in-law and her folks, my sister-in-law and her mom attended the interview with my daughter and my sister-in-law's father. And it was the first time my sister-in-law and her mom had ever heard his story, right? And how beautiful to have my daughter, which is, the niece, writing about it, right? It's just so beautiful, so beautiful. So a lovely thing that kids are doing, high schoolers are doing at school, and just bringing, the story, the experience, and the honor back to a veteran. So this year, I had one client, Bill, who my daughter's known because she used to go with me to his sessions. And Bill is a veteran, and he was a medic right? And so like, I can't wait to hear this story. I really can't. And then we have another friend of ours who served as um, a OB in Vietnam
Mhm.
for women working in the rice fields, right? Like, I can't wait to hear that story. That's gonna be, she's gonna interview both of them this year. So yeah, I just think it's just a fascinating way to bring honor and preserve people's legacy.
Yes, well, that's what I do for a living, is sometimes for business, but oftentimes they hire me because they're older people who want to tell their story.
Mhm.
And it's that simple. And they want to leave a legacy for their children. That's actually quite common. They want their children to learn the morals and ethics of the older generation. Yeah, at Trader Joe's, I used to hire a lot of vets. Uh, I hired probably more vets than anybody else in the country as consultants. My boss was not really happy with that. Don't know why, but I hired a veterans group. They were all special forces, ex-Marines and things. And it was quite fascinating because I would say, I need this done, and it'd just be done. There was
Yeah,
they weren't late. They didn't give me
yeah,
no back talk, no nothing, no ifs, ands,
right.
or buts.
Hmm.
They negotiated a price. If they went over, they ate it, and
Right.
it was awesome. They were ruthless as far as getting it done.
Now, I've hired a lot of recent retirees as well, and they're wonderful to work with. These are motivated, self-managed folks, and they don't want to change the world. They want to give back,
Right.
right, and contribute. So that's been really a real blessing because there's this whole workforce of people who are overlooked, and
They're
they
all
have much to give.
they're overlooked because of the ethic, I guess, or the way that the mindset that people looked at things back when I was growing up was the American dream.
Hmm.
You grow up, you have a family, you have a job, you stay at that job until you die, you retire, and then you stay in retirement for a while and then you die. And that was the American dream for the whole time I was growing up. And I didn't figure out that that wasn't my dream until I hit my 50s. And then I realized that's just dumb. The companies don't work like that anymore if they ever did. And people shouldn't be locked into a company just because, I mean, my grandfather he worked at an assembly plant. He put together car parts and things. They don't do that anymore. It's all robots now. But which is kind of sad because he was a vet and he stayed in a camp for 4 years in Japan and served for his country, and he worked on an assembly line. Should have gotten more honors than that. But anyway, um, it's interesting. Yeah, there's this whole generation of people who are there for us to give the wisdom back that they've learned over the years.
One thing you mentioned just a bit ago was the legacy. And I want to bring this up because I feel like it's so important. And it's not just your legacy, your story, but it's also physically what you're leaving behind
Mhm.
for your family when you pass. And what I mean by that is because I do work with so many much older adults, I'm always talking to them about making their files, making those files and those passwords and those accounts as easy for a family member who's grieving as possible. So there's another type of legacy that I'm calling the digital legacy, right? It's the
Mhm.
legacy contact and digital information. I remember firsthand when my grandparents passed away, this is 20 years ago, and they had planned for years in the event of what would happen, which I find to be very loving, right? Because you don't want to leave the people you love with this mystery of what to do, right? There are already a lot of decisions that you have to make. And I remember my grandparents having a meeting with my mom and my uncle and saying, okay, here's where all of our documents are. They're in this, metal file cabinet, portable if you need it, it's here, the title, all this stuff. And I remember them being really organized about it. But even when they did pass, there was a lot of unraveling to do nonetheless. And so when I work with some of my clients, and actually with some of their children who have called me and said, you know what, my mom passed away. Do you know how to get into her computer? I'm like, yes, I do. Let me think about it. Let me think about that. Okay, here in her file, she has a file with all her passwords in it, right? And so I had a lot of calls from adult children trying to now recover a Mac password, right?
Mhm.
And so I really believe that, especially with the people that I've worked with who are what I call legacy leavers, because they have planned their lives so that they could then retire and in a certain place, that they also need to take the extra step and plan their, it sounds terrible, their death, no, or their files, and what happens when, so that it's not so hard for family to unravel the mystery.
Yeah, when my parents passed away, um, my dad passed away from COVID, and my mom passed away earlier. He lives in California. I live in Florida, and I wasn't going to go on an airplane in the middle of COVID. That would have, that probably wouldn't have been a good thing. So I had to find people in California who would help manage that. Turns out he was a hoarder, and a little apartment up in Big Bear Lake, and his place was just full of God knows what, and we couldn't get back his legacy. And when I realized, as we were going through that, nobody knows for sure what happens after death. But what we do know is that we have the power to leave a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And if your legacy that you want to leave is that of being a hoarder and a cranky old man and whatever else that legacy is, then that's your legacy. That's how you're going to be remembered. If you want to be remembered as something different, and that's how you're immortal, is your legacy, then change it. Do what you
Mm-hmm.
said. Make those records available. I've kind of become the family photograph hound because I like that. So I got tens of thousands of photographs. I got them all scanned. They're all on the computer. They're on the cloud. My sister has passwords, um, and it's all there. It's all organized. Although I don't know who most of the people are because my parents didn't leave any. They have photos. They're just photos. Like, okay, there's 10,000 photos here. I don't know who any of these people are. There's no way I'm going to find out who these people are because it's an older generation. They're gone. And I'm seconding and thirding and fourthing what you just said is that legacy that you leave behind is you.
Yeah.
It's what people remember of you. I was doing genealogical research, and you come back and you hit the treasure hoard of somebody who kept journals and pictures and things. And then you hit that's fine. And they have an okay life and it looks pretty good. And then you hit the person who has the really fascinating things. She was in a circus and she had these brilliant costumes and things, and that's all you know. And it's like 2 pictures and maybe 3 words and three sentences, but you can piece together something, but you never know if it's true. And all she needed to do was leave a diary, or something. And you're absolutely right. It's else you are in charge of your legacy, and those and throughout your life you should probably keep it maintained, and as you get older what's coming.
Yeah.
Make it
Yeah.
make it available.
I know. I really do encourage my students to make the whole password thing more transparent for the people they love. That's it. And what I find, when I worked with a lot of people one-on-one over the summer, I had a lot of people in my staff that were out. So it's just like, all right, I'm back in the field and I'm meeting with people again, which is great because it really does allow me to create more content and more workshop topics, that kind of thing. But they keep seeing and meeting with people, and they've got their passwords written under here and there. You know what I mean?
I do.
And they're not sure what it is and stuff. And so a lot of the work that we do with our clients is helping them come up with a password strategy and tracking that and logging it as well. Because you would think, what typically we would think of is, oh, well, why not just use a password manager, right? But the thing is that a lot of older adults don't want to do that, and they don't completely understand it, or they don't trust it. And because of that, there has to be other alternatives for coming up with unique and secure passwords and ways to track them. I've found so many of my students reusing the same password across multiple accounts, and that's like a terrible thing to do. And yet overall statistics will tell us that typically people are reusing the same password across 3 accounts. So one thing we do is we do a lot of education on coming up with unique and secure passwords for each and every account.
Mhm.
And I started to build on a theory and teach this theory to my students. And it's one that they can remember so that they don't always have to rely on a book to look it up. So, and that might be a topic for another discussion. Please don't get me started on it, because once I start talking about it, I cannot stop talking
Of course.
about
Well,
online security and passwords. It's kind of been sort of my pet peeve topic, you know?
we should do another talk on it, because I am a security expert too, so we could have a nice talk.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, but I started a new series. I'm going to begin teaching it next month. It's called Scam Savvy, and it's a 3-part series on just awareness. The first part's awareness, the second part's on avoidance, and the third part's on action. So I'm going to start teaching this series at all the various communities or online or wherever. We're going to just roll it out and see how it goes. And yeah, I just think the more that you can bring awareness to the various scams that are out there, the better everyone is.
If you need help with that, I've been scammed successfully. I've defeated scams, and I've helped people defeat scams, and I've counseled people who've been scammed. So I've been on all sides, except for I haven't been a scammer. And if you need like a guest speaker or something,
Yeah,
I can help with that. If
you
you've
got
got
it.
any kind of shows where you need a guest speaker, feel free to reach out. You
Okay.
probably have a good idea of what I'm good at now. And obviously, if any of your older people want to, or any of your clients want to write a book, I can help with that. That's one of my jobs. To help people write book stories, whatever they want to write about their life. I'll finish this up with my favorite client story. She was 78 years old. She approached me. She said she wanted to do a book. And I looked at these people, and they were definitely not the model that I had in mind for a client. I mean, they weren't, it's like step out of the Beverly Hillbillies, and I thought, okay, I'll just have a good lunch with them. It'll be fun. Well, they had the money to do a book, and her bucket list item was to write down her dreams and make a book out of it. So I did that for her.
Okay.
And it was a young adult book, and it became a lot longer than she expected, and it went along for 16 months. It took us. We finally published it, and then COVID hit, and she passed away. But she was so happy at the end of her life that she had taken her dreams, all of her dreams, and made it into a book, which was something she had desired from when she was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's still there on Amazon, and it still sells an occasional copy, but that wasn't the important part. The important part was she got it written. And
Yeah.
I wrote her a really good story, and she really liked it. She edited a lot, but that's fine. It's part of the process. And that's my favorite story. I mean, I didn't make a whole lot of money on it. It was definitely not at my premium rate, but it was fun getting her stories. They were all handwritten too, and trying to decode her handwriting. Um, but it was fun. And so I do have a good taste of what you mean by working with the older generation. And as technology improves and as medicine improves, that older generation is going to live longer.
Yes, it is.
People
Yes,
are living to 100 now.
Mm-hmm.
Within prime health.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's going to become more and more common, 100, 200, whatever. And that's going to be interesting when that older generation starts realizing they still have their facilities, they still have their bodies and stuff. and they have income now, and they can put that to use.
Yeah. Yeah.
And get back into the workforce, but in a different way, because now they're smarter. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
lot smart. I was dumb as a brick when I was 21.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. And it's really changing things. And yet there is a lot of systemic ageism out there that needs to be debunked constantly.
Well, yeah, it's a wealth of knowledge that's out there, and it's a wealth of people who have learned the hard knocks,
Yeah.
who know how to work in the workplace because they've been there. So they're
Right.
not going to be the problem employees. They're not going to be. They're not going to. They don't have families to support. They don't have all these things that might get in the way of being on the job, so to speak. Although that would be bad if I was in a company and there was HR listening. But they're valuable employees. And with modern health, they're going to be living longer and healthier. And it'd probably be wise for us as a nation to put that to use and not let it just disappear. Well, we're coming up on definitely an hour. This was a fascinating conversation. I'd love to have more anytime you want. We can certainly talk about security and other things. Do you have any closing words that you want to mention to your audience?
Yeah, and this is something that I actually mentioned in my TED Talk, is this: when you are helping an older adult with their technology, rather than taking it from them, show them instead how to do it. And that's my Titanic takeaway.
Do you know, in writing, that's actually very similar to what we say in writing? You show, you don't tell. In fiction. And so you're absolutely right. Show them how to do it. Show them again if you need to. Show them again if you need to. They'll get it. They've lived an entire life. They're still alive. That means they got something right.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, thank you, Richard. I've enjoyed it very much.
Well, thank you.
And
And how do people get hold of you?
they can reach me on our website, which is seniorsavvy.net, N-E-T, or you can also find me on LinkedIn and just send me a message there under Abbie Richie, and I post regularly, so please reach out.
Yeah, I'll do that first. I don't think we're connected on LinkedIn yet. I think we connected on Facebook.
Okay.
Or maybe not. Don't know. Don't remember. Yeah, this has been Richard Lowe with Conversations with Influencers, and I hope you had a good time. I'm a ghostwriter. I'm also a writing coach, and I do LinkedIn branding, which means I do LinkedIn profiles. So until next time, thank you.
Hi. Thank you. Have a wonderful